colleague from East China Normal University, Li Tong, to everyone for the first time. Hi, Li Tong, where are you?
Hi, here. 嗨，大家好，我是丽彤，很高兴见到大家。I'm glad to see everyone here. Nice to meet you all.
Li Tong is from the same university as Yongqiang. So as well, we're welcoming new colleagues from our partner university. Yeah, I'm just thrilled we have new members to join Lunch and Learn, and welcome everyone. So I will start sharing, and we will get today's session started. So 今天我们要读的诗是王维的《相思》。The poem we're reading today is by Wáng Wéi, 相思. Well, to continue the theme of this entire season about, can anyone remind me or remind everyone what's the theme for this season? 关于什么？ Yeah, 怎么说 love? 爱情 很好. So it's the last session, but I know, well, to love is absolutely, we will continue. But this is the last session for this year. We will continue next year, and we will share the schedule with everyone during the break. 好的，那今天我们要读的诗是《相思》，王维是作者。
王维相思
is the poem. The poet, sorry. So here is, we know he is, Wáng Wéi is from Tang Dynasty. Many of you perhaps are very familiar with his poem and with his story. He's one of the greatest poets in Tang Dynasty. If I have to name 3 or 4 poets in the entire history of Chinese poetry history, Wang Wei will be definitely one of them. Li Bai is still my favorite. So you may find from different sources that Wang Wei born into different years, not necessarily 701. It could be 693, 694. The beginning of his years is a little bit ambiguous.
Wáng Wéi.
But every biography refers to him. You will find that he is perceived as one of the most gifted men during the Tang era. That's the early 8th century. He's a poet, a musician, and an artist, born in an aristocratic family in Tang Dynasty. Wang Wei was easily navigating the elite circle of the capital, Chang'an, in northwest of China, and was highly sought after. We unfortunately don't have any of his paintings left today. He's known to be a great painter, nor we wouldn't know how he would really sound like when he's singing. But we do have his poems, one of which, 相思, we will read today. We don't have his, we don't have his paintings survived today, but this one I shared a couple of years ago when we first read Wang Wei. This is a duplication of Wang Wei's painting of Wang River. The painting depicting a villa and adjacent area he bought when he was retreating from the life in the capital as a devotee of Buddhism. It really truly represents the very ideal of a world cherished by Chinese in China's literary and art history. So this is actually one of the most famous duplicates by Guo Zhongshu. Guo Zhongshu. It's about 200 years after Wáng Wéi's time in Song Dynasty. It's currently at the Palace Museum in Taipei. I just want to quickly also show the entire piece, which is a very long scroll from the calligraphy in the beginning, telling the story how Guo Zhongshu comes to duplicate this piece by Wáng Wéi, and to the centerpiece that showing 20 sceneries of the area that Wáng Wéi bought to retreat into. You could see the brushwork, well, the lovely scenes that has the buildings surrounded by mountains, trees, and the fishermen in the river. Well, there are quite a few buildings that, well, we can peek into to see different activities going on there. There are two men sitting on the top, maybe drinking tea, maybe have a nice chat. And then we can see the small forest. Well, this is the plum trees that's flowering. And one of the poems that we read is about Lu Zhai, deer fence. That, of course, well, there are deer in this garden, but also a reference, well, to his devotion to Buddhism. So the end of this painting, Wáng Wéi wrote 20 poems about the 20 scenes referred in this painting, and this duplicate, in fact, recorded all of them, and it's listed there. Actually, Wáng Wéi's friend, these 20 poems are also paired up with another 20 poems by his friend Pei Di, and together 40 poems together become the collection of the Wangchuan poems. That's one of Wáng Wéi's poetry collection that's left. And we came to know some of the most famous poems by Wáng Wéi, including Lu Zhai, that we have read a couple of years ago. So let me come back to the poem. The poem we're reading today is not from this painting. Let me, okay. 相思. Well, this is actually, I find a little bit outliner of Wáng Wéi's poem. As well, we have read his poems are often, well, it's a quatrain. It's a pentasyllabic quatrain. 20 characters, very simple, direct. And for this one, I find it's not necessarily strictly following the pattern that a quatrain would be in terms of rhythm, in terms of the part of speech. It has to really pair from one sentence, one line to the other. But this is elegant and yet also speak straight to the heart. So I just feel for the concluding session to have this poem that talking about love, but also refreshing and giving a lot of hope. Perhaps, I hope, that will be a nice poem that to conclude our theme for this season. So let me read the entire poem, and then we can read line by line together. If you want, of course, well, you can read together with me. I will start from the top. 相思，红豆生南国，春来发几枝。愿君多采撷，此物最相思。That's the entire poem. All right, let's get into each line. So again, we have pinyin, the characters, literal translation, and the poetic line translated. I will read it twice, and you can mute yourself. You can hear yourself. You can hear my pronunciation. I will pause after each character for the first time, and then pause after the entire line for the second time. Okay, here we go. 红
红
豆
豆
生
生
南
南
国，
国，红豆
红豆生南国。
红豆生南国，
韩国。
很好。So I want to just pause a little bit here to ask, have you seen 红豆? Do you
Yeah.
know what 红豆 looks like? Can you?
Yes.
Susan, are you talking? Could you?
No, it's the red bean that you can buy in the supermarket or in the Chinese supermarket. They got plenty. And the red bean, and the red bean ice cream, they are the best.
Great. I'm glad. Well, some of you are familiar with 红豆. So now I'm posing a question, and we can talk about this after we finish reading the poem. Why 红豆 in this poem is referred to as a symbol for love? Keep that question in mind, and we can talk about that later. Okay? 好，第二句，春来发几枝，春来发几枝。
出来发橘，
很好。Next one，愿君多采撷，愿君多采撷。
愿君多采撷。
很好。Last one，此物最相思。此物最相思。很好。Yeah, that's our poem. Let's see. Yeah, it's a simple but really beautiful and elegant poem about missing each other as lovers, or it could be as friends. It is also said that Wáng Wéi wrote this poem for his friend, a famous singer at the time, Li Guinian. Some of you may actually remember there or know there's a poem by Du Fu referring to Li Guinian as well, even though he's not known as a poet. But at least two poems that I know has something to do with this singer Li Guilian being friends with many poets, including Wang Wei and Du Fu. And when Li Guilian was in the south, it was recorded that he was singing the song that the lyrics are from this poem. So that's how it's also a reference or a story that's around this poem, not necessarily the romantic love between man and woman or lovers, but also could be with friends. So let's. I will lead and let's read the entire poem together the first time, and then I will ask my co-host Li Tong to lead the second time. I can see a couple of hands are up. So let's read first, and I will go to you, Marilyn and Noah. 好吧？好，相思。红豆生南国，
生我
春来发几枝。
春来
发几枝，
愿君多采撷，
愿君
多
采撷，
此物最相思。
此
物
最相思。
很好，很好。Yeah, Marilyn. Question 问题。
我的问题就是红豆不一定是我们吃的那个红豆，红豆你可以当做其他另外一个植物。The 红豆 here is not necessarily the 红豆 of the kind we eat. Is it? I think it can refer to a different kind of red berry. Maybe something close to the what's it called in English? The one that we see at Christmas time, or there's a Bynner Mandina.
Yeah, that's indeed. Well, it's a good point. That's also why I want to raise the question, why 红豆 in this poem. And it's not just in Wang Wei's poem. In China, from a long time ago, 红豆 has been the symbol of love. And Wang Wei didn't invent this. So thinking about different places, we may have some knowledge about 红豆, the red beans that we see and we encounter here. But imagine a long time ago in China, in ancient time, really, this poem was written in 8th century. And also in the southern in the southern, region of China, what exactly red beans would look like, would feel like, what the color of the 红豆 would represent. And that may all go into why 红豆for a long time, even today, has been a symbol of love. Yeah. Noah, 你的问题是什么？你要 unmute yourself.
Oh yeah, I was just wondering, so is there any, you mentioned like a sort of allusion in the poem to Wang Wei和李龟年的友情. Is that actually in there or no? Just a little confused.
Oh, 王维和李龟年的友情. You mean the friendship between Wang Wei and Li Guinian?
Yeah.
Right, 李龟年 I can put in the chat. No, it's not an illusion. This poem has another title. It's called a poem written for 李龟年. So we know that this is a poem that Wáng Wéi, even given the title of 相思 here, more to the content of the poem. It's also written for his friend, 李龟年. Okay, I have to get out of the stop sharing and maybe put the name in the chat box. 龟年.
Thank you.
Sure. 李龟年. Yeah. And Samantha?
Yes, I had a question. So can you tell that this poem is addressed to a male friend from the content of the poem, from the line 愿君才多学?
愿君多采撷. Well, you could say that because Jun, especially today, it's more of like 君子, a gentleman. But it could also mean a polite way of addressing someone. So today, when we look at this poem, it could be the feeling or the affection that's represented by this poem and Hongdou can happen between men and women, can between lovers. But in this, if Wáng Wéi is written as what we know from the subtitle, it could be representing the friendship between the two males. But by Jun itself, in today's in context, we are not necessarily associated with just between men.
Sure.
Yeah. What's fascinating is always when Wáng Wéi or any poet, when he or she wrote the original piece, it's written for particular time, for particular emotions or meanings that the poet wanted to express. But also the great poem I find, and I would invite everyone to share your feelings, is really, it's connected to the readers, and especially across different time and place and even cultures. So the meanings would go from the writer, the poet, him or herself, and really have multiple meanings and even changing meanings based on the original foundation. Yeah.
I have two more questions.
Sure.
Following up what the other lady asked, doesn't Jun appear in context classical to refer to both? It's just you. It's men or women.
Sorry, I have technology problem today. All right, good. Sorry. In the room, that the light will go off automatically. Sorry, Marilyn, again.
No, doesn't Jun simply refer to you in classical? It's not a question of male or female. So here we have to guess. If it weren't for the subtitle, we wouldn't know to whom he's referring. Isn't that correct? I mean,
so yes, that's correct. So Jun is, well, especially when you write directly to someone. Yeah, it's Jun. It's a polite way of addressing the other person. So the subtitle, which did not, oh, sorry, oh no, keep it open, please. 因为这个网络 yeah, sorry. I just want to keep the door open so that I have the correct, the right Wi-Fi here. So yes, if without the subtitle, we would not know that this is written for Li Guinian or for a male friend. The 相思 is really the title that's known today now related to this poem. And the subtitle, oftentimes you have to dig in a little bit to find out, oh, this poem is actually written as originally with the subtitle for Li Guinian.
My second question has to do with 写, the character.
Mm-hmm.
来写 is I've not seen that character before, and I was going to look. So
I see. I see. Well, this is a character that's often well, it means collect, to pick up. It's not a common character that we encounter even today in colloquial or used often in written language, but it is the part of the vocabulary. Yeah, 采撷. And you can see the 提手旁, the hand here, that's related to the meaning. Yeah.
Can you comment on, well, I was going to ask you to comment on his translation of An Armful, but maybe you have a comment on on Bynner's whole translation of the poem, in which he translates 相思 as love, which is a bit over translation, I think, because the phrase itself is simply thinking of that person. It's a mutual thought process.
Exactly. Well, it's this. Well, I will. I can comment on this translation. It's coming from the website by Bynner. I used some of the translations before, which I find it's a really wonderful source that I can later put it in the chat box. I honestly haven't found a really good translation for this poem, as simple as it is, because even though if you just look at the literal translation, essentially saying red beans are growing up in the southern region, and in spring there are a handful of branches would spring out the leaves and the beans. And I wish you, well, there's no I in the, wish you to take a handful so that, well, because these beans are really for missing the other person that you want to miss. So if you look at the literal translation, it does not really translate as a symbol of our love. So I would say this is a little bit of a stretch that the translator goes a little bit too far to translate it as love. I agree with that. But since I don't have a better, because we compared two other translations. One is by Xu Yuanchong, a well-known Chinese poetic translator, whose translation is, I would say, equally stretching from the literal translation. Yeah. So Noah?
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to Marilyn's point that I agree with you. This translation takes a lot of liberty, but I also think that's inevitable because if you're writing in English, especially if you're writing something short in English, there are a lot of syntactical and technical limitations. Like if you think of the last line, 子物最相思, 最 is most. So you think it would be ordinal, but you can't really, that doesn't really make sense in English. Or if you made sense, it would be way too long and it wouldn't fit in the rhythm of the poem. And I think actually that love is a pretty good translation because it's a kind of, I think it is, because it's a sort of mutual longing. But love in English means a lot of different things.
Yes, that's the problem, Noah.
Yeah, but you have the context set up. Let's say take home an armful for my sake. And that implies a mutual affection, and also a distance that, okay, you're in this other place. I want you to pick these red beans for me. So I think that actually it's not because it's sort of set up or alluded to the nature of this relationship at earlier points in the poem. I actually don't mind the translation love. And even if, and I see why you have a problem with it, but I would ask you, like, how would you translate it if you think that love doesn't work? What would work?
That we think of each other. I always think that poem should imply more than it states. And so it's just a difference of opinion in how to render it, which is why poetry is so interesting.
I thank you both. I love this discussion because I remember maybe this is the amazing Wáng Wéi's writing of this poem as well. His way of writing poems always trigger even more than 2 or 3 translations than other poets. If some of you were in the other session when we were reading Lu Zhai, I was quoting 19 different translations of Lu Zhai. That's a book. That's the book itself is called 19 Ways of Translating Wáng Wéi, and that's also testifying how difficult it is to translate a poem, not only in Chinese case, but in any case, it's very difficult. But especially in Chinese case, because of Chinese language, in classical Chinese poetry, the pronunciation, the meaning, and we're not even getting into the image, the imagery of the characters, because that's definitely, it's very integral part of the beauty of Chinese classical poetry. It cannot be translated once it's in a different language, English or others, which will be the next step where we're going to write at least one character. That's also the point of making the point that the imagery of the way that the characters are written is part of really conveying the meanings as well. All right, so maybe before we jump into the writing part, Li Tong, do you want to lead the read aloud?
Sure. So can we start now?
Sure. So just a pause after each line so everybody can repeat.
相思，
相思，
红豆生南国，春来发几枝。愿君多采撷，此物最相思。
好的，谢谢丽彤。
Is it quite fast?
It's all right. Okay, so about writing. Well, for each session, we only choose one character to write. Can anyone guess which one we will choose today? We have done Sorry, we can write that one. It's a fun one to write.
Could it be Yuan?
Something about heart, Xiaoan, you're right.
Yeah.
Well, I was really thinking about Si, but Si, this character, we actually have learned in one of the earlier sessions. It's really fun. We can talk about that a little bit if we have time. But today we're going to do Yuan. 愿君多 采撷的愿
愿
character, you know that the top part is yuan. It sounds very bottom part is a heart.
愿 wish
And look at the older form from about 100 AD. That's Xu Shen's version. We've been using his version only mostly. As well, his book is really the first book on I just love this character. It's not that different. You can see still looking like yuan.
愿
water, where you can see water coming out.
Yeah. Oh.
All right. Can everyone hear me now? Hello?
There's a strong echo.
Okay, let me see.
愿 亲 愿
Okay, can everyone hear me?
愿
Yes,
亲
unstable. 不太清楚。
清楚
Oh, I really apologize. What's the problem with this spot? Yeah. Okay, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Oh, good. All right. Okay. Yeah, I was talking about this top part, that thinking about the place where you will see the beginning of a spring, water coming out, and how you would use the image to represent that.
Oh.
See this part? It's the rocks. Well, you're coming out from rocks. Remember, we were learning the character B, and there's a rock on the bottom that looks like the 石头的石, the first two lines. And then you see the water, the shape of the water coming out. And even this part will be more of showing the direction where the water goes. So that's still speaking to it's the idea, but it's also using the image, the pictographic imagery to represent the idea. And that's yuan. That's like when we are talking about even today's meaning, 原因, what's the reason? What's the beginning of something that's happening? And that goes back to this image representing that fundamental meaning. And then the heart, of course, will speak to this particular character, yuan, and that's to wish. And you have the heart in it. But it's also, so the top part is also representing the pronunciation of the entire character, yuan, but also has a connection with the meaning, as in many cases we have come across. As well, you have something in your heart and you want to make that will, and that consists the entire meaning of this character, yuan. Yep. So, and I will stop sharing and we can go to the writing part of this character. I hope you have your pen or your brush and your paper ready. 谢谢. So now we have the So again, I will start with the 小篆. That's the style, 小篆. We just learned from the top to the bottom. Can you 看见吗?
可以看见了。
可以。
Yeah. Sorry. Oh yeah, this one is much better. Sorry, I'm just going to go back and make this a little bit more obvious. Okay, the top part. And then this is the rock, I would think. The abstract rock with the 2 lines. And then we have the water coming out. So again, if you are using a brush, I'm not even using a real brush. The idea is to keep it even and balanced. Unlike other free cursive style, 小篆, this style is really about holding your breath and strength evenly and have a balanced line. Pretty much even throughout the entire character. The water coming out. And then part of the heart. It would be quite challenging or difficult if you're using a real calligraphy brush to keep everything even. That's yuan. So in today's colloquial Chinese, you can, well, this character is still used a lot. Yeah, 愿你幸福，愿你快乐, wish you happy, wish you have a good life. So this is still a commonly used character. Yeah. And in fact, Wáng Wéi's this poem, Wáng Wéi was really writing in almost like a sentence by sentence. It's not that kind of antique style. 愿君多采撷，此物最相思. This almost like a dialogue that he could have with his friend. That's also speaks to one of the reasons why this small poem is so popular today. My new co-host Li Tong actually has something at the end of the session from popular culture today, share with everyone. Just remind me, Li Tong. I tend to run out of time. I'm looking at time right now. It's also already, we have like almost only 10 minutes left. All right, so let's write the current form together. That will be more sort of, you have to have the yuan on the top. And then the hard part at the bottom. That's 愿，愿君多采撷. So many of you have been to almost all of the sessions, and some of you may be here and there. Since this is our last session, I feel like maybe we can do a little review of what were the characters that we have gone through, and you can see the common the common part, the common element of all these characters we have learned. Let me just quickly share the screen again. Okay. We had, can everybody see the screen? Wait.
Oh.
看不到. Oh, just 1 second. Here.这4个字 the 4 characters we learned. 这是什么? What is this? Anybody remember?
Chill. No. Is it? No.
这是秋. This is chill. This is Chou. Sorry, I'm led by Xiaoan. All right, this is the first one. It's been a few months. This is I. This is the theme of our entire season. The heart is becoming a little bit different in the middle. The story of I character is actually a little bit complicated. So it comes into the form as well we see here. This is actually representing a foot. We talked about that a little bit. And then the top part looks like a hand, but it's actually letting the voice or the air out from the top. So there's a lot of different meanings in it. But I love when we talked about this character, someone said, it looks like the heart is in between 2 hands. This is always subject to our own imagination and interpretation. But the point is, well, you find the best way you feel connected with these characters based on the original explanation of this by Xu Shen, who already was doing some of his own explanation and interpretation at the time. So this is I. This is 这是什么?
情.
情. Yeah. We can see the heart here. And 清, the color 清. And it's also the pronunciation part of this character. And this is 愁.
Chou.
You have Qiu on the top, the pronunciation part, but Qiu is also the season of melancholy. So the meaning is part of the character and the pronunciation as well. And then you have the heart, and this is our yuan here. And what's the common element here?
Heart.
Jin.
Yeah. Qing, that's the heart, and you can see all of these characters has that heart. And if you look at Xu Shen's book or a traditional Chinese dictionary, the characters in the dictionary, the index, the way of organizing the characters are by the meaningful part. All of these characters will be all categorized under the category of heart. Unlike now, you follow the pronunciation and the Romanized letters to use the dictionary. Yeah, that's.
Could you review I, the parts again.
Yeah, it's a little bit of excuse me, a little bit of a story, because this I is not the original, even in Xu Sheng's book, is not the original character for the love I. Originally, it means you walk slowly. And that explains to this character's original form with a foot in it. And the top part, supposedly, is the pronunciation part. And that's coming from another character that's the original character of I, has stopped being used even at Xu Sheng's time. So this is the character that's originally meaning walking slowly, like one foot after another. And because the pronunciation is the same as the pronunciation of I, it was borrowed to represent the meaning of I, to love. That happened after, well, even before Xu Sheng's time. So when he, in his book, 说文解字, when he was recording this, he was recording the original meaning of this character, I, as walking slowly, one foot after another, but also referring to another character which now has stopped using, and you cannot find anywhere even from long time ago. And that was the original I, representing the emotion, the feeling of to love. So there's a little bit of disconnection here, but well, when we were in the session talking about the character I, the very first time a writing of the character I, to love, in the meaning as to love, was some of you may remember, was on that bronze, the Zhongshan bronze hu, the wine vessel. That's actually written quite differently from this one too. So it's a, yeah, this is one, it's way too simplified to tell these stories, but it's one way of really bringing a sense of understanding how the characters work. Yes, Marilyn?
May I ask, if we look it up under Xu Sheng, is it under the foot or the heart radical? Which radical does Xu Sheng put it under?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Because well, Xu Sheng may put it under foot. And as I was actually spending quite some time trying to decipher how the character I evolved from its very beginning to the way that we're looking at it today, right? And this foot, this little foot of this character, sort of, and also the whole story of borrowing this character to represent I was like really thinking, if you think about, you have some kind of feelings towards a person or something, and well, but also hesitate to express immediately. It's a little bit like when you are dragging yourself. It's it's you're putting one foot after another. That's the action, but in the heart, you're doing similar things. So it's not too far from. There's a reason why this character was borrowed to represent the action itself is borrowed to represent the feeling. Due to the nature of characters need to be having some imagery of the meaning, right? But also I was thinking, there's a Chinese character, I Mei. Some of you may know, I can write.
Like ambiguous, is that what it means?
Exactly, ambiguous, I Mei. So I can write it here. If Li Tong can.
Oh, 他刚写了.
Yeah, let me see. I will pin myself spotlight.
with a 口字旁，
对的，口字旁。
那是
Exactly.
不是翻译 ambiguous 的声音，是古字吗？或者是现代？
No, 现代字. We're still using it. 暧昧 means ambiguous, but you will see the character I to love is in it, and it's in general. I feel can be explained as well. This character, the sound of it, the imagery of it is to be associated with the kind of behavior or the feeling that is hesitating, that is sort of not that clear, but you have to find a way to express it. Yes, Noah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add by saying ambiguous in English means a lot of things. My interpretation of 暧昧 is that it refers to ambiguity in interpersonal relationships.
Exactly.
And
Thank you.
the most common use, so the most common phrase that I can think of that uses it, and this is a great phrase that does not exist in English, 搞暧昧, where, oh God, how would I describe this?
Oh, you mean God? Well, I can say thank you very much. That's a very important comment. I would say like one come to my mind is 他们的关系很暧昧. Like their relationship is 暧昧 means, well, yeah, it's a little ambiguous, and especially often related to personal, like whether it's whether are they dating, are they in a relationship, are they, especially for that, are they boyfriend, girlfriend, partners, or they are just sort of hanging out. That actually I find in today's relationship world, it's quite 暧昧. Yeah.
So it's considered a modern character, or actually my question is, how far back does that term 暧昧 appear? I mean,
that's, yeah.
I find it more in contemporary novels, for example. I mean, 白话小说 as opposed to in the classical language.
I don't know exactly. That's a very good question. I don't know exactly how far it goes back. We can definitely find 暧昧 in today's language, in today's 白话小说. But my strong guess is 暧昧 as a word goes back to way before contemporary time or modern time. In 陶渊明's poem, there is the 过故人庄. There is, it's not 暧昧, but it's 爱爱远人村. So he doubled the word, the character 爱, to describe the to describe the smoke coming out from the villages. So this word or this character really goes far back in terms of expressing the scenery or the feeling of something not so clear or shaking. So even though when it's used in different contexts, the meanings, especially when you translate it into English, it's very different languages, very different words. But if you think the root of the kind of unclear, describing that kind of status or behavior, there is a root meaning there that's connecting all these meanings.
It's a constellation of appearances that lead to a more distinctive connotation or I mean, it has to come from several sources in order for us to glean what the
exactly. Yeah, and I also I have to confess, well, when I use Xu Sheng's 说文解字 a lot for these sessions, let me stop sharing. But I'm not like looking at Xu Shen's original copy. That there are many contemporary copies or the versions that's really one is to really transform or not translate, but to make Xu Shen's book more accessible to today's scholars and students to learn about that. Because the original copy, we don't even know exactly what it looks like. There are some Song Dynasty copies of Xu Shen's original 说文解字, but that's already, we're talking about from 100 AD to 10th century. That's already about 1,000 years, 900 years in between. Yeah.
There's an interesting question in the chat from Milan Vigil, who asked whether Wáng Wéi would have used the other yuan, not the one that with a heart radical, but with a yezapang. Is that your question, Milan?
Okay, let me see. Yeah, because there are quite some comments. I didn't see the question. Oh,
yes, that's the question.
Wouldn't Wáng Wéi have written that yuan? Yeah, that could be. I don't know exactly Wáng Wéi, which version Wáng Wéi himself would write, because, well, we don't have the original copy of that. And it could be if Wáng Wéi is writing, because this yuan is the traditional, like we have traditional and simplified Chinese characters today, even two different versions. And what we could, this yuan, if I'm not mistaken, is the traditional version of yuan, right? But if we go back to even Xu Shen's time, it's the heart at the bottom. So we really don't know whether this yuan, like when this yuan in Milan's question, when it was started to use in language. Yeah, well, this is our last session. I feel we have been coming along for all this month or even years. It's really great to have everyone.
Thank you.
And of course, the last session, next season, we will continue and start. Let me show the last, this one. And we will still continue our Lunch and Learn. We will take a 1 month break, and it's also the month I would imagine we will be busy with holidays. The Chinese New Year this year would be the year of the rabbit, and it will fall in January. In fact, January 22nd. So there will be a lot of activities, and you join a China Institute or online, and we can still stay connected. Last, before I forget, yeah, I'm not going to forget. Li Tong, could you please post that link to the chat box? It's a contemporary, it's a song written, a really transformative version of this poem, but it carries the title Hong Dou, and it's a contemporary popular song. And if you want, feel free to click and to see what's one of the contemporary versions that's connecting 相思, Hong Dou, and the emotion of to love. 好的.
I'm glad,
Yeah, that's
we went back
our session.
Thank you.
谢谢，
谢谢老师。
希望你们喜欢这首歌曲。It's a song, and also it's a thanks to Li Tong. That's English, Chinese characters and pinyin in the song too.
Oh, okay.
好的，好的。So I will stay for a couple of more minutes. If you want, well, feel free to stay, and we can chat a little bit. And otherwise, well, have a nice holiday season. 愿大家节日快乐。
节日快乐。